Record. Hello, this is Mario Ybarra Jr. We're here at Slangwich Studio, and we're here with the awesome, wonderful, amazing, gracious Katie Bachler, and she's visiting us here from the desert. She's been spending the whole year out there, and we're going to talk to her today. So hi, Katie. How are you?
Hi, Mario. I'm good. I'm happy to be back. How are you?
Oh, man, I've been good. Pretty busy, and happy to have you back. Yeah. So I have a few questions for you.
Okay.
The first question, I wanted to talk a little bit to you about a kind of historical context for yourself. I know that you came out to Los Angeles to attend USC's Art in the Public Sphere curatorial program. You finished that up about 2 years or 3 years ago now?
In 2010.
All right, so it's been a few years.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And you've been kind of putting things into practice since then. So can I ask you, what was your experience there, and what is your kind of take on art in the public sphere?
Well, well, yes, Mario, you can. I believe art has an inherently social function, and it relates to people and experiences. So I was either going to go to an urban planning program or art in the public sphere program, both trying to get at the same thing, which is how do we create experiences that bring people together in a city, and how do we use objects to relate people to themselves and to the world around them. So I was really drawn to this program because it traced through urban planning and through art kind of the role of artists in curating the public sphere and curating experiences, versus in a gallery it's often curating pieces for a wall. And I'm interested in curating experiences and framing experiences. Okay. So this program traces the history of the public sphere and art in it, kind of starting with Clement Greenberg and sculptures and back in the day, and going through to happenings in the 1960s and feminist performance art like Adrian Piper and others in the 70s, and then ACT UP and Guerrilla Girls in the 80s, and then moving into relational aesthetics and Rick Reet and his Curry in the gallery, and Felix Gonzalez Torres and his piles of things. How do we relate art to people? How does art become a personal experience? How do you touch it? How do you actually touch it and feel it and smell it? And some of these early ways where it's actually pick this thing up, or eat this thing, or put your hands. Is it Valley Export who made people touch her boobs? Touch a person, wanting to actually have physical experience with other people. And now there's a new term called social practice. Yeah. Are you familiar, Mario?
No, I'm trying to avoid it, but I'm just asking.
Yeah.
Will you teach me? Because I don't know. What I didn't go to school for social practice.
Oh, social
But
practice.
I do like the idea of experience.
Yeah.
The experience is something that can transform people.
Totally.
Can create a empathetic moment. Can leave traces with the person that goes through them forever.
Right.
And I guess you could call an experience in kind of art history, the idea of the opening comes from the triptychs in Renaissance painting, where they would open up the painting, right? And you would see the different stations of the cross or the crucifixion, and so those things were experiential, and or the gate, the heavens opening up and Christ ascending, and that experience was, for lack of a better way of putting it, a moment, right? The kind of angels blowing trumpets moment. But how does that happen in a kind of played out actions, or where does that happen in played out actions in terms of activity or moving through a space, or taking part in something, or how did that differ for you, or how did that strike something within you to kind of look at and pursue? Because within art, that it's different from urban planning, and where urban planning is involved on a kind of civic level with architects and builders and engineers and stuff. The art part is a little bit different. So what drew you to that part?
Well, it's a pocket. It's a pocket of like purity or something, like a utopia that can exist for a little bit of, here we're all together and we're sharing a meal in the middle of the street, or we're all getting together and like making this park for a short amount of time. But art's allowed to just be temporary, and in those things being temporary can be really powerful. Like, it doesn't have to be, oh, we're planning this great architectural phenomenon that's going to be there forever. It's like, no, let's get together and like move in the street for a little while, and or let's tell a story about our grandmother in the street in a park. And it becomes about what's revealed in that moment, and doesn't have to be forever. And it can be ephemeral, but people that experience it are changed afterwards.
So it has more of since having more of an intimate moment, or an intimate experience, with the smaller groups or things that are kind of passing, or for what I found too is like things that might be not even recognizable as art, right? And I think that's what an experiential action or time in relationship to art can have, and that it's something that it kind of lingers into the person's life, like
right,
and like it creates this kind of residue that continues past them. Like, I'm gonna just be gross, and I saw a funny quote the other day, and it said like, farts are just the ghost of things you eat. I think that it has like this kind of internalization and then passing through of the person that then takes form in some kind of gaseous, exclamation and other points where like in their life they'll have aha moments, or like the moments like later on where they're like, oh, like I had this experience with you and this action or experience in the park, then I could have these kinds of moments, not within a contextualization of somebody's kind of parameters, but just in my own life in general. Exactly. So it kind of highlights their lives again in general. Oh, that's interesting. The public sphere, it's when the word public, when that's used, it talks about, it seems to be like a huge group, like a public, like I don't know, everybody, but it doesn't necessarily mean that, and it seemed to kind of take place in like a public that you were working with workshops that you started to develop outside of school, outside of graduate school. And I remember that one of the first meetings, or the first time I met you, you were working with a bunch of kids in Watts at one of the Watts House Projects things, and I think you were working for LACMA, or I don't know what institution you were working for, and you're doing these mapping projects, and you had these kids with these huge sheets of paper, and they were all over the floor making all these mapping projects. And I don't even remember what your prompt was for the kids or what you were doing, but I remember just seeing all these kids engaged and making with you. And making with you in a way that you were down on the floor with them, making maps with them. So can you talk a little bit about the workshops and things that you've developed, these educational experiences that you've developed outside of school and on your own, and how you've been able to bridge the different ideological paths that are really important to you, things like community and nature, et cetera, and how you bridge those into a kind of education programming, and how you've been able to create experience for all types of people. Can you talk to us a little bit about the ideologies that you've been holding kind of to heart, and how you've been trying to express those through your workshop experiences?
Sure. Well, yeah, for me, education has to be experiential and non-hierarchical. So it's not like I'm coming in as this professor that knows everything. I inherently try to create experiences and create a place for experiences to happen by asking a question or handing out paper and lots of materials and saying, let's all make a map together. This is how I feel. How do you feel? Like asking questions and engaging. My idea, I'm influenced by the likes of like John Dewey and Maria Montessori, and even like Buddhism and impermanence, and trying to create spaces that aren't binaries but that are fluid. And it's been nice to work with institutions like LACMA and the Craft and Folk Art Museum and other places that trust me enough that I can just go out and like do these things with kids. And so it's not so much teaching, but like setting up a framework for experience.
So you've been able to kind of use these different models, you're saying, to develop the frameworks and these kind of platforms for possibility. But you do have like very kind of really passionate beliefs.
I do.
That you're bringing to the table.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about some of these passionate beliefs that you have, Katie? Because I think they're really instrumental in how you create your platforms.
Yeah, I really believe in nature, and I believe that if we as human beings are more connected to the natural world, we'll feel more connected to ourselves and to each other, and that there's all these layers to place that we don't experience every day. And by revealing like the history of a tree or the history of a coastline, we're more actively participating in the moment of a city and a time. And so I'm a strong believer in nature, and I'm a strong believer in feeling. And so most of the workshops and work that I do as an artist has to do with trying to illuminate people with these different things about where we are. Because I think change happens by connecting to place and really feeling invested in where we are. And if we feel invested in a place, we'll want to protect it and save it and share ideas about it with other people.
Sure.
And it's not like, I don't necessarily believe in like top-down planning. Like I don't believe in top-down education. It has to come from within. We have to be empathetic towards each other and compassionate towards each other and to the trees in the city. And only then, I don't know, I believe that only then can we evolve. So I definitely push that with my work. I'm like, let's know that this is a pink pepper tree. Smell it. It smells like pepper. It came from Peru. This tree wasn't always here. It was moved here during the 1930s when California was trying to be an exotic place. And so now there's all these exotic trees here. And what does it mean that trees are moving to different places? What does it then, like just thinking about migration and that there's like flows of people and nature, and just to talk about it, just to say like where we are right now isn't how it always was, and it has a complex history, and let's talk about it and not make so many assumptions about a city and about like a CVS on the corner. It's more complicated. And
but you've also been able to, since I've known you now maybe for 2 years or so, and I've been able to see how you've been able to develop these workshops and pedagogical types of experiences with young people. You did a great project here with us at Slangwich. You worked with Tony Lopez and a group of the young girls here, and you guys made this really cool project called Scaling Park. That whenever I pass by, they've really been taking care of it. It's like kind of, some days it's kind of overblown, but then I come back again and it seems raked out.
The neighbors care. They feel invested.
Can you tell us a little bit about Scaling Park and how you guys, the kids, figured out what you were going to do there? You kind of rose to the challenge of Scaling Park, because there were a few people that I would take there, like, would you want to do a project with us here? And they'd be like, you're crazy. But you were crazy enough to do it. So can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, I mean, it was just like from the second we first went there and started scheming ideas, it was like these kids are connected to this land and they want to make something happen. And like we started talking to the neighbors were making maps for them, giving us pizza from El Pizza Loco. And like there were babies involved. Like people just like, it started to be a vibe. Like people started to feel it, and it was clearly there was a social need, and so it happened out of a need, and then these kids got so stoked on it. It's like, when do kids get to plan their own civic spaces?
I think that the idea of need, because people ask us with Slangwich, how did you start Slangwich? Why did you start Slangwich? And the best answer I could come from it was one, that there was a need, but also besides being the need, that there was an urgency for something to happen. Like there needs to be a kind of urgency for it to happen. Really because if it's kind of lackadaisical and things are kind of open and and there's no sense of urgency, like it's really hard to create momentum with other people. But if there's a sense of urgency around it, like I can imagine like all these different movements and revolutions and things that have been happening around the world in recent times. They're happening at a rate because there's an urgency. Urgency is really important, and I think that that's one of the things too that I've been able to learn from you. One is the enthusiasm about conveying kind of knowledge and learning together, but one about like a kind of or the urgency, where I felt like there was an enthusiasm, but also an urgency for you to kind of share these things, for us to understand about the history of nature and the history of place and etc. But besides doing your workshops and the great projects like Scaling Park and your pedagogical workshops, you've been also practicing as an artist and doing exhibitions. And I remember last year we took a field trip to see your exhibition that you had down at Angel's Gate.
Oh, yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because that's one of the things I think is really a pivotal space for artists that are engaging in the social realm or public realm, is being able to translate that information into from not just experiential things that could happen in the context of workshop, etc., but could also take place in form of exhibition. And I think you were really successful at kind of transforming information that you had workshop with people, etc., into exhibition. So can you tell, and it worked in that space. So can you tell us a little bit about that experience and how you felt having like an exhibition as opposed to just the experience, or the experience that then transitioned to exhibition, which I don't think everybody can kind of straddle very well. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, I can. So the paintings and objects that ended up in that show are kind of like they're traces of an experience. They're one way of representing my experience of like the Port of Los Angeles and the military base by San Pedro. So they were various drawings and maps that were like my own personal experience, but hope that they would inform in the public viewing like a shift in view of maybe a military base could be seen as a butterfly preserve, or you can talk about the construction of Terminal Island by framing it in a map in a certain way. So it's through physical artworks and trying to like get at the same thing as a workshop would be unveiling. I think that there's different ways of getting at the same ideas and the same truths. Like, that's what art's role is. It's like to get at something. Like you have these tree stumps here with graffiti on them, and I feel like that gets at this really integral urban nature interface, like cool culture phenomenon. Like just you get these other ideas just by looking at something, and that's the power of art. So I think it's a workshop, a pedagogical workshop, a painting.
So you don't hold a grudge against having to have an exhibition?
I don't love having exhibitions. Like it makes me a little bit uncomfortable because I'm like, is anyone going to come to my opening? Are they?
But you could say that about your experience.
I know,
too,
it's
right?
true.
Yeah.
It's true.
But I think it's just a part of the continuum of it, because I think if you don't have the exhibition part, what I feel is that you're missing out on an audience that you could provide a model for to do things with,
Totally.
Because if people miss the actual experience of your workshop or working in Scaling Park or whatever, and then it's a different way to engage in an audience.
Yeah.
Just like a blog would be or a website would be. So just a different way of distributing the models. Or it doesn't have to be from 12 to 1. It could be open through gallery hours. And I think that component of social practice really needs to be re-examined, because I feel that those things that or else it kind of will be ghettoized from other types of art practices. Because it can't just be in the program section of the museum. Like I feel like it should be on exhibit in the museum too.
Right, and I was talking to someone about this the other day, like institutional funding for ephemeral work, and that there's a totally different funding structure. You get paid less if it's in education or public programming versus being curated in. So how do you?
That's why I'm saying, like, I think that there can be like a kind of just a little bit of thought or kind of discussion that could go into the exhibiting parts of these kinds of projects, experiential projects, and there are all kinds of ways to do it, and that they don't necessarily just have to be annotations or kind of notes of something, but it's a similar problem that conceptual art had or performance art had. So it's not like there hasn't been a precedent. Even video art has gone through the same type of thing. So there are precedents for just ways of formalizing these types of experiences for presentation and exhibition that I think could have just discussed be like a kind of no-brainer. But I feel that there's just a kind of, on both ends, a little bit of a kind of prejudice in relationship to like how the different pragmatics of the different practices operate, that I think are kind of unnecessary.
Right.
And so I think that in terms of like developing like a kind of inclusional thing, it's also like about including a type of practice that is experiential into as many means of distribution as possible.
Right.
And one that is formalized for art is museums and galleries and things like that. So, all right, but I'm glad that you've been trying to strike a balance. Because I'm glad to see that, because sometimes I see the things and I'm like, great project, but terrible display of like how the project works. So those things are just concerns of mine in relationship to that. Okay, well, moving along. So you've just spent a year in Joshua Tree in the desert. I don't know what you've been doing there. You've kind of been off the grid, so maybe an occasional Facebook post. Not even that. No,
I'm very off the grid, Mario.
You're totally off the grid. Not even maybe a text. I don't even know how. Maybe I just had a vision of you somehow or other, or maybe thought I saw you passing by at the mall. I don't know. So tell us a little bit about what you've been doing up in the desert, Katie.
Well, Mario, this was like me. I felt like life was so good in LA. I was like, oh, making art and teaching, and I needed a break. Like I needed a break from the institutions I was working for, and I also wanted as I was talking to you about nature and like our mythology around nature. I was interested in debunking the myth of the desert, because LA people always go out there for a weekend. They're like, I'm free. It's the desert, but it exists in relation to a city. It's like and outside the city is an escape. So what happens when that escape becomes a real life? So I was really interested in.
When things go Mad Max.
Yeah, totally. Like, what does it actually mean to live in the desert? It's not beautiful. It's dark. The desert is fucked up.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people are out there because they have nowhere else to go. They're stuck there. So there's a lot of darkness there. It's not all like mythological ideologies of being free. It's like, oh, my car broke down and my husband left me and I'm on meth, and so that's been interesting to see, and that's one reason I'm there. So I'm trying to like uncover these truths, and I've been doing a series of interviews. I'll leave my blog. I'm like interviewing desert people about life and living and how to live a good life, and trying to see how people are creative, because everyone out there makes something. Everyone out there is kind of like isolated and doesn't work in a traditional economy. And a lot of people are on unemployment and like make super amazing ice cream that they distribute at the community breakfast, or make really weird assemblage art, but I've like never heard of the art world. So it's been really interesting to just see how people live out there and how they build their homes. So that's what a lot of the work I've been doing is, just researching people's lives. I'm having a conference next weekend about living in the desert. You should come out. In the desert in a community center.
Oh, really? Well,
yeah.
So what is that? How's that going to be organized?
Well, I've just been talking to locals, and they're going to come share their products. Like, people make rad stuff. Like, this one guy builds these really weird giant garden boxes that go like 6 feet into the ground, because you can't garden in the desert because there's ground squirrels. So he's like invented this product that's beautiful, but he's a kind of crazy old man named Dave.
So you're kind of acting as a conduit to bridge desert people together. So you're creating the network for them to. Will that be something that you feel like? How is that though? Like so okay. So you've been out there for a year. You've been interviewing talking to desert people. You've been finding desert people that make rad stuff. Yeah. You've been digging in the ground. I don't know what you've been doing. But you've also been teaching out there a little bit. I've been teaching out there. Yeah. So you've had like 3 kind of kids that you've been tutoring, and are you making art with them, or what are you doing? Yeah, I can't not make art with them. I'm making art, making machines, inventing things. I can do a lot more because there's fewer kids, so more expensive materials. We've been singing a lot. The kids and I sing a lot out in the desert, and we make sculptures about darkness in our hearts. Like they're doing a lot of that, which is weird. So the desert is really dark, huh? It's strange. There's a stranger energy there, I think, because there's so much space. You have to pay attention to everything. It fills up the space. I can see 180 degrees in like every direction. Like there's nothing blocking the horizon. Oh, I see.
So it's different. And I'm trying to create a bridge with LA. Like Carla was going to come to the women's dinner in the desert. We had like 50 women artists from LA come out and just like eat a meal in the middle of the desert at a long table. And I'd love to do more events like that, kind of bridge the gap between LA and the desert for specific reasons. Like come have a dinner or come learn about building a solar panel, but in the desert. So like,
would it just be a one-way Stargate like into the desert, or
no?
Would there be a?
Then I also
want. Is there like a reciprocity back into the city?
Yeah, that's what I want to work out too. Is bring desert people to LA because many have never been, and it's only 2 hours away or so. But it's a totally different culture.
Oh, so that's been the kind of who, what, where, why of the
I guess
desert,
so.
right?
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah. But also, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about every time we've had a conversation, there's never been a kind of one-sided kind of just art speak. We've also, another thing that's kind of been really inspiring talking to you has also been like your kind of enthusiasm about other types of knowing or experience, i.e. feeling. Right? Feeling. What? Feeling in relationship to art? What that people haven't talked about feeling in relationship to art for a long time. Spirituality, a way of kind of connecting with the spiritual. Healing. A lot of our discussions have been about. I remember before in our earlier conversations, you would talk about wanting to become an art therapist,
right?
And how you felt that art and kind of making can really lead to a healing kind of process. So can you talk a little bit about that stuff, the spirituality, feeling, healing, and how do you think, or where do you think art and these art experiences that you're talking about, how can they engage us on those levels?
Yeah, because art is outside. It can be outside of language. It can be this like really powerful conduit into our spiritual core selves that we don't always know how to express. But like, this is what I am, and this is what I'm doing today. It's a way to like express. Yeah. Do you want to close it? And should I keep talking?
Yeah, just keep talking.
Okay. So it's a way to like get at something. It's like super pure, like a soul, like art that's about process. It's not about product. And I think it's something different when it's like I'm doing art for art therapy. It's like just feel the process, just like make a thing and don't think about what it's gonna be. Just make a sculpture and like feel the clay and feel yourself like put sand into it, but don't think about what you're doing. But just the act. It's like more about the act of making. Yeah. And then the object is just it's happenstance. It's like, oh, that's what came out of like this feeling period. I was just feeling purely for an hour, and I made this thing after feeling for an hour. Yeah. And you know.
I've been talking to that a lot, mostly to like my graduate students that I work with, and they come at it and they're like the classic thinker. The Rodin sculpture I just saw a few weeks ago in Philadelphia. And it's like the thinker, and he's sitting there, with his hand on his chin, like very pensive and contemplative. But then I saw this funny cartoon that said like the thinker, and then it said the doer, and the next panel was just like an empty pedestal and like no statue of a man thinking. So it was like the thinker sitting there with his fist on his chin, and then doer, it was like nobody there. It's like some footprints walking off into the distance. And I've been trying to talk to my students because I think they get to like a kind of crisis, especially the MFAs, where I think in an undergraduate educational experience, like it is about making, and you make a lot of stuff. And then you get to grad school, and then it's supposed to be about thinking and being smart when you're making stuff. So then they don't make shit.
Right.
So I'm like, all right, guys, like we have to shift the process. Like it's not about thinking through, it's about making through. Can we make through something?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, you have a full-on plan, and you've plotted it out, and you've thought of every kind of art historical and theoretical reference that you could argue in a critique situation, but that isn't getting us anywhere because you're stuck. You're not making anything, and you're not making through you're not going through this kind of process that you're talking about. So the kind of making through has been my new mantra. Make through, nice. Make through, think through, make through. And then because you what happens is I feel we're just in a kind of state where kind of art is stuck in a kind of think through moment. And I think we've lost touch with those kinds of, like, the feeling of making, it might sound kind of hokey, but you know what I mean? Like, expressing yourself. Like,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
express yourself as, I don't know. It's a kind of conundrum that we're kind of faced with. So this idea of healing, though, like, where can healing happen with art? Where do you think it could happen?
Just getting things out of you that you can't talk about. It's just like having an outlet that's your own, like a pure feedback loop of like production and viewing, and then looking at it, and then keeping on producing and having it be just like for you, and having it be outside of it needing. It doesn't have to be goal oriented. It doesn't have to mean anything except what it is to you, and it's unexpected. So it's like we all have like a pure consciousness. We're all like pure souls before we grow up in different places and go to school and get constructed. Like, we're energy. And I think maybe this sounds hokey, but I think like art can like, people talk about when they're like on LSD, they see these like crazy shapes that are swirling about everything. And I think there is this like pure energy force that we all have inside of us that's been like shifted by the environments we live in.
Yeah, I like that idea of energy, because ever since I've known you, you've been like a ball of energy. I'm like, oh, Katie, go ahead, go ride your bike then, go get the kids in, go make something over there. I'll be here. And energy is really important. And to have that energy, also enthusiasm, all these kinds of things that, you know, you would get shushed for in like in a museum or in a restaurant in New York City.
Totally.
Energy, enthusiasm are really great kinds of places to start. So your plan is, I know you've been in the desert now. You know, you had Satan took you to the church top and told you, gave you the kingdom and all this kind of stuff. But so now you're kind of, coming back. You're visiting us here in town today, and you have some new ideas for what you want to do and how you want to pursue your practice as an artist, the pedagogical relationships you have with students, and how to build these kind of workshop experiences. But the most exciting thing that I've heard you say today is that you want to make your own school.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a big deal. So can you tell us a little bit about that, and even if it's just roughly sketched out, and what would that mean?
I mean, it's like it's an experience feeling nature school. It's just like I don't think I want to go to school for art therapy. I think I want to start my own school, that kind of embodies the pedagogy of like art and feeling and nature and connecting to place. Like I wanted to start a school called Place School.
Place School.
It's like about where we are, like learning about where we are and experiencing it through art making and through adventure hikes and history lessons. I think it's really important to know where we're from, and that's history. So yeah, that's my dream. I hope it can happen.
What would it be, like a kind of private school, a charter school?
It would be like a workshop space. It would be like studio. I mean, you guys are a totally amazing model for it. Like there'd be classes, there'd be studio, there'd be like a little museum about like nature history.
So it would have a space.
It would have to have a space, and that's something like. What would language be if you didn't have a space? Like,
yeah. Space is really important. To be able to come and have a site and to name a place is really important. I was talking to this kid down the street the other day, and he has his little hot dog stand, and he was making roasting corn on the cob the other day. But his real goal is to, he's been reading all these kind of financial magazines, and he's like, man, I really want to learn how to be like a kind of like a stockbroker or deal with stocks. And he's interested in all these financial things right now. So I'll walk by the other day, and we were chatting, and then I was saying, well, what do you want to do? And I've been talking to him over the past few months. And I was like, it's really important that you speak it, like you say it, you utter it. And he was like, yeah. And it was funny because that moment I was talking about my friend and that he's going to be a grandfather for the second time. And right when I said that, his son and the girl who's going to have his baby, they both were walking across the street, and I'm like, oh my God, like I was just talking about they're gonna have the baby, and there they are, you know. And then I was like, see, you got to say the things that you're want or you're thinking about, and look, they manifest themselves. And there he was, and he was like, oh man, well, you got to start saying that about all kinds of stuff. Say that, oh, I'm gonna make $1 million, or I'm gonna do this, or we're gonna. And I was like, well, right now I'm gonna say that you're the best hot dog roasted corn maker on the block. and to be conscious of being able to like articulate that, and then just, you know, and then I told him, well, biblically that's how God created the world. Like he spoke and said, let there be light, he spoke the world into existence. So, you know, I would encourage you, and that's why I'm interested in seeing like how you would articulate this school, because I know you have some really strong partners, allies, and a cohort of people that are also interested in doing something like that too. So I'm really interested in seeing like how that would work out.